Really appreciate you making time for me and just love what you've been putting out. I'm so shocked that you haven't read Carlos Castaneda, because a lot of what you say is stuff that people that really are focused on those books, especially your book Awaken, or Awaken the Immortal.
Right. I've heard his name. I've heard his name many times by many people, but I just my own. I mean, my bibliography is there for everybody to look at. I've got, I posted it on Facebook and on YouTube, all the books I researched. And he's not one of them. He's not on it, but it's not surprising to me to come to the same conclusions. I mean, I haven't read a lot of Rudolf Steiner either, but I'm hearing there's a lot of parallels. So
yeah, totally. Yeah, Steiner has a lot of incredible work as well. And I binge watched your the Immortal stuff, so I'm a little behind on catching up on the other stuff, but really appreciate what you've done, man. It's just spot on and really validating a lot of the truths that I've come to in my own life. I've studied with shamans my whole life. Okay. I've sought out really rare shamans, difficult people to find and track down, and I live in apprenticeships and stuff. And so focused a lot on the Carlos Castaneda books, because there's like 12 of them, and they literally it took me reading them over and over, all 12 over and over, to even get to the place where I can even kind of talk shop with the people that really understand them.
What time period is he?
So he started his training with this old Yaqui Indian in the early 60s, and he wrote books from the 1960s until 96. And he died in 97. He started out as an anthropologist, just trying to get somebody to teach him about peyote. And so he ran into this old Indian and said, "Look, I'll do anything, whatever." And he put some, and the old man gave him some tests to see how strong he was. Right. And pretty soon he found out he wasn't there to learn peyote. He was there to learn from this man, because this man was more knowledgeable than any plant medicine could ever teach him.
I see, yeah.
And so this Indian pretty much pulled the carpet out from under his feet, and showed him that there's more to this world than meets the eye. And the way he did that and the teachings that he provided were so dynamic, and the transformation that Carlos Castaneda went through and how honest he was in his books was sort of a breath of fresh air. He was just very humbled by how stupid he was and how the stupidest questions, and he didn't hide anything. Yeah. And so it was really like what he called, the books were his way of reviewing his life. It wasn't like he wasn't trying to get rich. He was just doing it to try to really understand what he went through. So yeah, I'm super focused on things of that nature, and I'm practiced in the Toltec art. So it's, according to those books, there's a rare type of Toltec knowledge that kind of is been passed on through oral tradition and hasn't been written down. And a lot of the people that practice Toltec stuff aren't practicing really the super authentic, hardcore stuff that used to happen. And so there's very few people that really understand those books and have come to the realization of how powerful they are. Right. How powerful each of us are in once we sort of are willing to really face ourselves and come to terms with how things work. And so I just so appreciate that you've overcome yourself in that respect and all that you've been through. I don't need you to repeat your stories, since most of the listeners will be your listeners here, but you're welcome to as well. I mean, just your story is a warrior's journey in itself. Mine was, I left my family at 16 to go live in the Rocky Mountains and try to live off a backpack, 85-pound pack. I was with some pretty powerful people who challenged me along the way. And we did use psychedelics at times, but we did it with more discipline than most. Right. We would use them only to see what would happen. And then we would get completely sober and do nothing but just work work on building awareness. And we just had crazy adventures and really powerful stories. And so I guess that's one of my first questions. Most people that have awakened to what you have had some psychedelic experience in their lives when you were in your rowdy teenage years, where there's doors open for you, right, with any substances at all?
Well, before I answer that, do you hear anything in my background right now? Is it just me? You don't hear a television far away? Because I have a lounge outside now. I can hear the TV's loud.
I can't hear it.
Okay, so it's not coming. Okay, this microphone must filter out stuff like that.
Yeah, I bet.
All right. Anyway, okay. As far as any type of mind-altering substances, I have a really weird psychological condition, and it was noticed when I was very young. I have been studied. You have to understand, I was adopted off the streets when I was 5 years old. What really happened to me from the time I was born till I was 5 years old when I was adopted, 5.5, almost 6 or whatever, I don't know. I don't really know any of that time period in my life. But I do know that my adopted parents had pretty much, I had suffered some type of trauma was basically the diagnosis based off my behavior, especially my sleep patterns, because I can fall asleep in a room by myself alone, but if I feel or suspect I'm being observed, I can't fall asleep. As soon as my body starts going into sleep, I jerk straight wide awake, and I'll lie there for hours awake. And this is my entire life. I've been like this. Well, the exact same thing happens when I have tried anything in the past, such as a drug or anything that's going to alter my mind. I have this panic, and it just wells up inside me. I've never done anything like you're describing. I've never done entheogens, mushrooms. I've never done acid. I've never done cocaine, heroin. I have been fully immersed in drug culture when I was in prison. Basically, as a shot caller, I was making decisions where weight was being moved to different cell blocks, and different officers were using. We used cell phones, and yes, I was immersed in that culture for a very long period of time. But I never touched the stuff. Even when I sip bourbon, if I start feeling that I'm getting a buzz, I stop. There's a fail safe in me. It's like a synaptic fail safe. It's a firewall, and when it gets hit, there's a panic in me that just dwells up, and I can't imbibe anymore. I can't partake anymore. I have done absolutely nothing in my entire life to alter my mind. I just can't. I have been asked this before. One other podcaster asked me this before, but I can't. So I have a really good buddy named Stephen Walsworth, and he's really into mushrooms, and he's on board with simulation theory because he has had trips where he has described to me trips he's had where he actually observed the architecture of the simulacrum, this hologram that we live in, and he describes it. And he says while he's in the trip, he perfectly understands it. But once he comes back out and he's jacked back into his avatar, it's really cloudy. He remembers how he felt, but he doesn't remember the particulars of what he experienced. It's that's about it. That's the extent of my knowledge on that. I just don't have any knowledge on what you're talking about.
No, that's really good to hear. Because that means that people have the potential of reaching the state of consciousness that you have, without having to open any of those doors. And it sounds like that door is already open for you. And so to try to open it any further is just, too intense. And that's.
If you're talking about like a hyper aware state, that's totally different. Now, that's not okay. I understand that there are different chemicals and even natural substances, or maybe even types of meditations that will allow people to reach those states. I do have experience, and I can tell you about that, and I can tell you exactly how it happened, but it wasn't from chemicals. It wasn't from anything I ingested or something like that at all.
Yeah. So Toltecs, they do things like fasting or sleep deprivation, or they do vision quests where you stay up for 4 days and 4 nights without food or water, and some people go much longer, depending on, like, sometimes that's about ego, but sometimes they're genuinely trying to alter their perception to meet God or whatever people say, right? So there's all kinds of methods. The way Toltecs discovered some of the things you talk about was back in the day from using power plants, though. That was what really shot them into being able to see that there's more to what's going on. And they didn't call it the simulacrum or a simulation. They believe that we're in a vision, like a dream, and that there's more than one of them. And if you could go backwards through the stream of consciousness to that which is projecting this vision, you can switch grooves and enter an entire other reality. And so they say there's multiple dimensions within this reality, but there's entire realities in addition to this one that have their own multiple dimensions as well. And so their goals are to be able to traverse perception in that respect, to be able to become lucid in that. And so I was curious that to hear that I'd heard in one of your shares that you don't have lucid dreams, that when you go to sleep, it's like turn something off and then you wake up and it's back on. And that's surprising to me for how active of a thinker, have a perceiver you are. But it makes sense now that you're telling me about kind of your history. Because from 0 to 4, Toltec say is like a really, nobody remembers anything from 0 to 3.5 or 0 to 4, because our perception is in a different place than it is after that period in your life. They're really interested in trying to figure out why. And so they focus on memory as a means to purify. They call it recapitulation, where you go back in your memories. Because you know how MK Ultra, they talk about they can honeycomb you and create like subsections of memories.
Yeah, they can fracture your personality.
Yeah,
I get it.
Shamans kind of do that too, to themselves on purpose, but with guidance and based on older teachings as a means to know more about their potential. Because when you are in a certain altered state where you don't have reference for your past, you become fearless and nothing's really holding you back. And so they try to take advantage of what they call the place of no pity, where you stop feeling sorry for yourself or anyone else around you, is when you can really act with authority and you can achieve perceptual heightened awareness, is what they call it. And so I'm curious about your heightened awareness experiences, like the motorcycle accident. That's so powerful to me to hear that something of that nature can happen. It's crazy how it happened to you, but at the same time, it shines a lot of light on what Toltecs talk about. So has there been others other than the extreme one with the bike accident?
Oh no, the bike accident was the only one of that magnitude, and it's totally different than what I'm about to share now. Okay. So that was very eye-opening to me. It changed the whole trajectory of the revealing of my research. I was going to reveal some research that was just straight, basically academic. My videos were going to be probably, you can guess by the first video I did, because it was pre-accident. My second YouTube video, all the way up to now 300, was all after the accident, and there's a year between the first and second video. I went through a paradigm shift. I had to reread all my research and recalibrate it and basically reassess, because the first video was done with, I was still a Christian. I was still under that mindset. I was still basically revealing information through those filters. But this would happen to me. But before I mention that, you just said something about how the shamans were fasting and all that. Okay, because one of my teachings, and because I believe this, and people know that I believe it, because they can hear it in my voice, they can hear it in my inflection. They know that I'm not trying to pass off some bullshit to them. I am absolutely convinced that we are subject to this basic illusion of reality, because we are jacked into by the central nervous system. And this central nervous system is a filtering system. It filters information away so we don't experience information overload. And we can experience basically these life sims sequentially, and we can understand it like in a time reference. And we're all in this together, but this hologram is multifaceted, and it allows us to experience different things, different experiences for different people, but we're still in this together. But what you're describing to me, the fasting and all this stuff, that gives them this lucid period, is they are actually damaging the interface between the soul and the in the central nervous system. The more you fast, the more you don't feed the avatar, the more the avatar is separated from the abilities the central nervous system provides it. Once that central nervous system is damaged or impeded in any way, the soul can see more clearly the surrounding environs. It can experience and understand more clearly what's going on around it. It's because it's not jacked in. Actually, fasting is actually freeing the soul from the imprisonment of the avatar. So it can see and experience what's really around us and do incredible things. Now, on the same token, I found another way to do this that has nothing to do with prayer, has nothing to do with fasting, and it sure as hell doesn't have anything to do with flying upside down off my motorcycle about 65 miles an hour and hitting a concrete pylon. There's a way that I found that I didn't even realize it was happening to me until in retrospect, I realized it. And then I embraced it and it became a lifestyle. But wow. When I was in prison, I used to just surround myself with pad of paper, a calculator, my night lamp, a whole pot of coffee. I had a little hot coffee pot, Maxwell House, freeze-dried coffee grains. Every day, this was my ritual. And I would pull the books out that I was going to research that day, and I would lose myself in the material. And I would forget that I'm in prison. It's not even an issue. I would forget that I'm Jason Brashears. I would forget that I'm even on an agenda to prove this or that or to find more Phoenix data. I would just lose myself in the material. And in prison, there was no distractions when I was in my cell. All the prison culture shit happens in the day room. It happens on the rec yard, in the cafeteria, in the shower. But when I'm in my cell, I'm in my little domain. And I would lose myself for 6, 7, 8, sometimes 16 hours, and I would just be gone. Officers would come and go, do a little, checkup with a flashlight. I would be up, the sun would go down, then the sun would come up. It would make no difference to me. I'm still sitting on my rolled up mattress. I got my old prison typewriter set to the side, and I would lose myself, and I would do this for years on end, day after day. But it got to the point where I would research material and write it down that I would completely enter in a whole nother, like, it's just a different state of being. There's a fantasy series that came out. I know you're familiar with it, Dune.
Oh yeah.
Okay. There's characters in Dune called mentats. They can process a tremendous amount of data. They were known for their acuity. They were like human computers. They were called mentats in there. That's the best way I can describe it, because my greatest discoveries and all these things that I've discovered and that I'm releasing on videos and that I have yet to release were from these spells. I would just be immersed into the material, and I would have this euphoric feeling. You fall in love with it, but it's not just a good feeling. It's a other reality type feeling, because I would read material from a book, and as I'm reading it, my brain is already processing the data and putting it into the appropriate files that I haven't even designed yet. I just know that I'm going to. And by the time I'm done reading a chapter, I've already compartmentalized everything that's in this piece of information and where it goes within the context of all my other research, which was all chronologically arranged. And as I'm reading material, things would pop into my head. I would multitask mentally, and I would instantly think, oh, Posidonius, 309 BC. He said something about the Hyperboreans, and so other ancient authors said he was talking about the Emerald Isles. And then in the medieval times, those authors all claimed the Emerald Isles are what the ancients called Ireland. So I'm talking about from multiple different source materials spanning thousands of years, from authors that had no contact with each other at all. All these fragments would be built into my mind into a narrative, and I would write it all down. And after about 10 years, I was done, and I had Chronicon done. Chronicon was my first draft of the history of the world, citing all the source materials, putting this whole huge piece of our history together. And it was the writing of Chronicon while I was going through these spells that I realized none of this could be real. This is all too mathematically perfect. And yet I have found every single one of these references from authors that were basically agreeing with each other over time and space. Authors that didn't know each other, didn't know about each other's research, lived at different time periods, lived in different geographical areas, wrote in different languages, didn't have the English translations until the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th century. And here's Jason in a prison cell finally putting all this together, writes this huge chronicon thesis, and it all makes perfect sense. It's all very verifiable. Anybody who wants to check the source materials, and yet with a calculator, it can be shown that it's too perfect. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. Every bit of that was put together in the same state that you're talking about, but it wasn't intentional. I would just fall into it just from the intensity of the research. My brain would just go into, I don't know, maybe theta. I don't know. It would just completely alter, and I would just become an information sponge, but not just absorbing the information. Somewhere down the line, I was really good at organizing it to where it goes, putting it in sequential order, and being able to present it to people, even though it's complex in the most simplistic terms. And that all came from these states you're talking about.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. That's yeah. See, it's a similar thing for shamans, and they seek that state as a means to be hyper productive, to channel information. They say that you can just pluck the information at a certain point, and without even having a book to read or anything. But those are very advanced teachers that had thousands of years of where the student was taught by a teacher who was taught by, where the lineage was kept alive. So for those of us that sort of come out of this tragic MK Ultra program world and manage to learn about our capacity and be able to focus to that degree that you've learned to focus, my teacher would say that rather than meditate, you're basically focusing on the abstract. You're falling in love with this altered state. You engage with it because it's a path of heart, and so Toltec say that the reason why we're caught in this perception is because we talk to ourselves. There's an internal dialogue that keeps this world here. But eventually, if you can stop talking to yourself, whether it's with psychedelics or other means, this actually goes away. And there's so what I practice at night is like blindfold on, eyes open under the blindfold, pitch black, and I wait for these colors to show up. And these purple will always show up, and you can track it. And it's really hard to pay attention to because your mind wants to kind of panic. Mm-hmm. But if you can stick with it, it starts to turn into sacred geometry, or an entire scene will unfold, and then it'll shift to like this bright red patch of light, and then you can enter into conscious dreaming through awake states. Right. So it takes a lot of discipline, and it's taken me 25 years to be able to get to the place where I can do this really well. But it's funny you brought up Dune. I was on mushrooms in the Oregon dunes, and I'd never read Dune or heard about it. I was 15, and I had a vision. I had a full-on vision of seeing all this intense society built in the dunes, and there was like flying machines, and there was all this stuff going on, and because there was in the background there was some like people that were on dune bikes and stuff, and their lights, and it was twilight. Yeah. Twilight's a really powerful time where you sort of are more open to different perceptions. And I had this whole vision of this whole story, and it was just so interesting. I thought, wow, this must be, I'd heard about people having visions and then writing fiction, and it just inspired me. And that next morning I went back to my house, and for some reason, I never do this, but I read the newspaper. And for some reason in the newspaper, there was an article about Frank Herbert went to the very state park that I went to that night before and had a vision. And that's what the book Dune became about. So it was within 24 hours that I had this insight that it was verified to me. And that was, I had already started my training in this world, in the learning about perception. So I knew that was one of the things that, kind of happens when you sort of open yourself up to stuff. And
well, you have a lot of modern authors like Ishak Bentov that I cite a lot, and older ones from over a century ago, P.D. Ouspensky. Look, these men we're absolutely convinced that we are surrounded in an information field, and that if your brain is absolutely receptive to it, that you can receive knowledge without reading books. All you have to do is tap into what your interests are, and that information will start filtering through your mind. I do believe people get more knowledgeable. I do believe they increase their IQ, and I do believe they get wiser if they were to just be more receptive to the things that their intuition guides them to, because intuition's never going to lead you wrong. We kick ourselves in the ass all the time because we ended up doing something somebody else suggested when initially our response was to do something else. It happens to me a lot. I get really angry. I have anger issues. There's no doubt. I even admit this on my videos, but I get really angry when a proposition emerges and somebody close to me basically has another idea, and my intuition has already flared up and I know exactly what needs to be done and how to get there. I often in my research see the end before I ever come up with the steps to reach it. I do this all the time in my problem solving. I already know the answer. Now I have to figure out how I'm going to tell people how I arrived at that. So it happens to me all the time, and often I will find the information that will show the cognitive leaps, every piece of evidence that built up to this, but I won't find this data until I've already made the cognitive leap. And the same intuition is awesome. Once you start listening to your intuition, you're gonna develop anger issues, because this is what it does. Other people always think they're right over certain situations, and they get frustrated with you when you disagree with them. Like, I have people in my personal life do this a lot, and we'll come up with a problem and it needs a solution real quick, and I instantly know, my intuition flares up, and then I go ahead because I don't want to promote conflict, and it's really not a big deal to me. So I go ahead and go with my buddy JR's decision. You know what I mean? I'll go with a girlfriend, Brandy's decision. And then I'm kicking myself in the ass later on because I already knew the right answer. I just went ahead and did it. So intuition is the predecessor of knowledge. And it's just, we don't listen to it enough. And it's never steered us wrong at all.
Totally. Yeah, I have the same situation, and with my kids and my wife, I just see what needs to be done. I'm in construction. I deal with really complicated stuff. I'm always the best at managing projects because I can just tell I have this ability to just see what's coming, and it's just there. It's not something that
right.
It's just because of the training I've done, and so. But it's taken years for my wife and kids to acknowledge that these things that I've been saying all along have turned out to be true. And yet they still don't trust me because it's going to take them years again for the stuff that I'm telling them today, and I've learned to let it go because, even though it costs me money, even though it's like all these things, these detours that they take,
right.
But that's their journey, right? In order for them to develop their intuition. And so it's a funny thing to learn how to be able to navigate this world with other people. And that's why Toltecs, honestly, they get very much into their aloneness. They're not really social creatures. They say there's no reason to follow the ups and downs of your fellow man, because we're here to sort of set ourselves free from what they call this phantom realm.
Yeah.
They say that when you start to set yourself free from the phantom world, even the people that you love will try to pull you back. The phantom program is so powerful that people don't actually want you to be free because it's offensive, right? And we spend pretty much our whole life being offended by one thing or another.
Right. There's no doubt. I agree. It's what you're describing to me right now is exactly what I tell my listeners in my videos about the media. Quit watching it. There's nothing, you're never going to gain any value listening to ABC, NBC, CBS, BBC, British Broadcasting. You're never gonna do anything for your life but start vibrating on a frequency you don't want to be on. Because once you start vibrating on the media frequencies, that's why they're called broadcasters. There's a real reason why the media does what it does, why it's all scripted, why it's all negative, why there can be all kinds of positive things happening in the city of Houston and environs, but they're not going to do stories on those. They're going to do the stories on the crime. They're going to do the stories on all kinds of taxes and everything that's gonna put you in a really negative frequency. This is what they do. And if you were to divorce yourself from all media saturation, you will find yourself every morning waking up in a higher frequency. And after 2 or 3 months, you'll be vibrating at such a high frequency that your own friends and family won't recognize you anymore. Physically, you are a member of the family, but you're going to have problems. I mean, any truther in this world who gets along 100% with all of their family, there's something wrong. Maybe you're not as much of a truther as you think. Right. It's because not that many people are awakened. They think they are, but most people are still, they're tethered to the world. Just like you said, these Toltecs believed. It's they're absolutely moored to the world. And I would agree with the Toltecs. I'm really interested in where this Toltec information would come from, because I know the Aztecs venerated the Toltecs, feared their sites, wouldn't go in the old Toltec ruins, the old pyramid cities and ruined cities of the Toltecs. Because when the Spanish were asked them about those mounds, and they saw ruins in there, and they thought there might be treasure in there, the Aztecs told them, you can go there, we're not. But those are the old Toltec cities and Toltec pyramids. And they venerated the Toltecs, but they didn't really, I don't know if there was much connection between the Aztec and the Toltec culture other than a recognition that they were their predecessors.
Yeah, and so when I refer to the Toltecs, I'm referring to a dreaming artist that comes from ancient Mexico, and it was a title given to them. And you could be Anglo, you could be anything, but if you graduated toward learning the Toltec arts, which do come from the Toltecs themselves, right? But in the Toltec world, there's no good or bad. There's only intent.
Right.
And sorcerers in the Toltec world did horrid things to their apprentices. They did the most incredible. Once they unlocked the world of perception, they would blast them apart with power plants and use them as pawns, just like we are being used. Some of us are being used as pawns in this European sorcery, MK Ultra. It's just a different version. So the history is pretty dark,
right?
And the types of things they did in order to understand their potential got really out of balance. And so it was during the Spanish conquest, very few people of that knowledge survived.
Right.
But the few that did decided to go very underground. And so they quit writing, they quit sharing, and there's only certain groups that survived. Carlos Castaneda happened to run into one man who had kept all that knowledge secret.
Yeah.
And then introduced him to his party. They're called a sorcerer's party or a shamanic party. And they believe with a large enough amount of people that you can do called group dreaming or being able to see and validate energy. Right. So like they could even look at an event that was happening across the world and telepathically tap into what was going on because of their human mass. The more people that form energy together, especially if they're the right combination of people, it just supports and creates incredible opportunities for collective consciousness. And so these are really rare teachings. Castaneda books will blow your fucking mind. A lot of people, it's so far out there that people say he has to have been a fraud. It has to be made up. Yeah. But I happen to be a student of a teacher who was very powerful, who was associated with them. And then I happen to have met so many of them. And my intuition and my discovery of the teachings have proven to me that these are not made up. They couldn't be. And if he did make them up, that means he's even more powerful than if he had learned it from somebody. Right. Because the stuff that he tells you to do, it fucking works. Like unbelievably effective, and it's a little ahead of its time. The basis is that you do these strange movements in groups. They're called magical passes. So it'd be like Qigong or Tai Chi, but they have a lot more power. Right. They give you this incredible surge of energy to where it's way past like psychedelics. It's way past holotropic breath work. You could do it while fasting with sleep deprivation, and you're especially going to get really, really altered, and you're going to open doors of perception. But they interact with the non-physical beings that you've talked about. They can see and interact with the phantoms or the ghosts or the what they call inorganic beings. And so they've discovered that there are forces here that we cannot see, that are preying upon us or acting on us. Some of them are helping us, you know, but these are beings that are kind of caught in a different layer than we are. And they make use of that as a means to help them discover more about the world. And they even access these beings for information, and these beings will tell them things. But they are also very difficult. Like when you're from 0 to 4, you're left alone. But around 4, these beings start stopping the lucid dreaming from happening, because most kids are just seeing energy and everything's amazing and they're full of joy unless they've been traumatized. And so they're basically trying to re-access all their youthful energy by going back into all their memories and collecting aspects of themselves that they left behind. And they call it erasing personal history, so that you can live truly in the now and you're not this person that you were. But anyways, it's really intense stuff. It's so worth studying, because it is going to be, in my opinion, kind of what people get into in the future, where like yoga and meditation and stuff has been popular. I really believe lucid dreaming, these crazy movements, and this art of memory work, recapitulation, I think it's going to be eventually a really something that people fall in love with. But yeah, I was curious what your experiences are with, or what you've read about or learned about as far as deja vu goes, what your theory is, how the simulation might play a role with deja vu, or if you've ever have any insight onto that type of thing, where people think that not just deja vu, but some people say or claim that they'll dream something in a dream at night, and then like years later, they're in the very scene of that dream, which they had no reason to have reference for. It's just sort of this random dream they thought that was meaningless, but it turns out to be sort of validated that maybe things are not as linear as we thought.
Well, I don't know about the deja vu. To me, it's just more evidence of edits, simulations around reality tunnels that are experienced in a hologram sometimes are not sequential. I mean, you can in your sleep experience an entire series of events that later on in your more lucid times, when you're not asleep, when you're jacked straight back into your central nervous system, you go replay what was already basically projected. Because this is a theory of mine that when we go into REM sleep, that's when all these reality tunnels are knit for us. And basically, AIX is trying to determine what our next pathways are, because it can't read our minds, and it can't just basically steal the programming of the simulacrum. In my own teachings, the simulacrum and AIX are totally distinct. And people confuse them all the time. They are not interchangeable. They are totally, absolutely distinct phenomena. But before we get into that, you mentioned the rituals and the physical gestures and all. Listen, what you're describing to me from the Toltec perspective is everything that basically you just described. But from my perspective, it's patterning. Patterning is basically it's an activity of somebody who wants to do something in the physical world to create an informed field. An informed field is what is created by almost any sorcerer, warlock, witch, magician, anybody in the world from any culture in any time period wanted to make something happen that they considered supernatural. Patterning is how they did it. We call that ritual, creating a ritual, doing that stuff. Well, it sounds like this Toltec information that you're conveying to me is very specific, with a physical type of maybe dance ritual or something. You call it martial art, call it whatever it is, but it's something that has worked. And if it's worked for multiple generations, then that means anybody who replicates that exact same ritual taps in and borrows that energy that was already created from the past times it was employed. This is the value. I'm a student of Francis Barrett. 1801, he wrote a book called The Magus. huge, giant work on magic and the occult, philosophical occult systems. Very, very deep. He's like Henry Cornelius Agrippa from the Middle Ages. And when I was reading Francis Barrett, I was noticing, man, this is real. I know because I was raised a fundamentalist in the Bible and all that. I never really gave wizards and warlocks and mages and all that much thought. But once I read Francis Barrett's work, and I realized that no wonder in the Middle Ages people paid fortunes for old Arabic spell books, because if you could replicate the actual spells and rituals that were done 500 and 600 years ago, you tapped into the exact same powers that they wielded. You didn't have to go through all the heroic things they did because they already did it. You're tapping into, because see, this is the whole theory in magic. If a phenomenon has ever been performed and executed favorably, then it's never ended. It's still there. It's in the cosmos. You got to reach out and find it. The only way you can find it is to get in sync with it. The only way to get in sync with it and draw it to you from the cosmos is to get the pattern right, which is the creation of an informed field, which is the generation of a ritual perfectly produced, just like it was done in the past, so you could get the exact same effects that they had in the past. So borrowing energy from ancient times is actually a thing. And I realized this when I read Francis Barrett. So what you're describing to me is not mysterious at all. It's just more evidence to me of simulation theory. It's more evidence that we live in a holographic construct, because in a hologram, everything that's ever been done in the past is still there. It just can't be seen because our vantage point is different. Let me get this bone away from this dog. Can you hear that noise in the background? I got a dog outside my door playing with a bone that's going to drive me nuts. Hold on.
No worries, man.
Wow. Yeah, my listeners on YouTube, they know I just got a puppy.
Oh, cool.
Let me tell you something. It's worse than a child. I swear. I swear. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, no, I know. We went through that too, and just destroyed so much damage to my house because of it. So
right,
costly, a lot more expensive than a kid even. Man, that's so cool that you said that, because it literally, when I'm doing these movements, especially when there's like hundreds of us at a workshop in Mexico where it kind of all comes from, it's just like borrowing ancient energy, and you can just feel and even see and have dreams about these beings that used to do this work, because and the amount of energy that you get, it's almost too much. A lot of people that do this work aren't really prepared and don't know how to creatively make use of that much energy,
right?
And so it can kind of send them off the deep end, right? And so shamans aren't that far from being schizophrenic. It's kind of like a fine line, because you've opened yourself up to so many things. And so I'm always fascinated by observing schizophrenic people and talking with people on the streets. And I have a lot of respect for everyone and everyone's trauma, because nobody meant to be traumatized.
Right.
Nobody planned to become schizophrenic. They may have taken a lot of drugs to do that, but they were taking those drugs because something else had happened to them that was making them want to escape reality, or because they could sense that something was wrong with this reality. And so that was their way of breaking free of the media spell, and so, yeah, it's just more validation on my end too, to hear your theories. And, I think the difference.
Schizophrenia needs to be addressed before you move on to another topic. Listen, schizophrenia is evidence that the filters of the central nervous system are not operating optimally, because the person that suffers schizophrenia is experiencing phenomena that the rest of us cannot perceive. So we think they're crazy. It doesn't mean that it's not there, but optically, we're only going to see about 5.5% of the electromagnetic spectrum. We don't know what the person that's suffering from schizophrenia can see. They can probably see a lot more of that spectrum. Their olfactory senses may be hyper aware because the filters have been removed. Their auditory range might be out of this world. They may may be able to hear as good as goats and dogs, but we wouldn't know because we're not them. We're not experiencing the world that they're experiencing. But the central nervous system is a filter. It's a processing center that filters all 5 of our senses. So those who suffer from schizophrenia and other psychotropic maladies, these people have had their central nervous system damaged. By having it damaged, those filters are weakened. When those filters are weakened, they are receiving way more information than we are. They're not crazy. They're seeing things that are there that we can't see. They're hearing things in the audible range that we can't hear. And for this, they get diagnosed with being schizophrenic. It's really, to me, it's very, very simple. It's very simple what's happening.
That's so well said, man. I'm of the same, I talk about it from the Toltec perspective, but I'm of the same opinion. And I really appreciate hearing that, because I've learned some of them, I've worked with some very wise or knowledgeable people, but some of the most craziest shit I've ever heard was from Indians living under a bridge in Montana, that had living off the bottle, but their ability to just really call things out for what they are, really be present in the moment, and explain what it's like to live the type of life that they live, not having a foundation, not having a base reality, being constantly moving from one intense feeling to another intense feeling. Like you said, there's no filter, there's just extremes. And it's just some of the most joy I've ever seen in a person or people of that nature. But it's also some of the most suffering I've ever seen as well.
Right.
Going such far ranges. So
I get that.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think, I think Toltecs say that's probably different than what you say is that I have heard you with some podcasts open to this idea, but they say that there's a force that came out of the cosmos that learned how to manipulate our perception as a means to feed off of us. And that these are what they call the voladeras, the flyers, and what other people refer to as archons or parasitic beings that have learned how to make use of our incredible gifts and basically control our perception by giving us its mind. And so they say that we all have a hive mind, a generic mind, that we all have the same thoughts and fears, and that it takes a rare person to be able to basically come out of that hypnosis. And that when you do so, you start to have the seer within, the original being, the true voice starts to come and have much more say. And so I know that that's different than a simulation theory in a sense, but it also makes a lot of sense to a lot of people, that because we do witness this hive mind where people just simply, especially ones that are tapped into the media, just it's like they live in a bubble that is so powerful that there's nothing you could do to convey to them that there's more to this world than what they've been told. Mm-hmm. And so just that, this idea comes from the idea, they say, that we are travelers, that we are meant to be traveling, and yet we've been caught in an eddy, that something has figured out how to keep us in place. And so maybe that is the simulacrum was designed to hijack our potential and has trapped us in a prison world. And instead of calling it, something that came out of the cosmos, maybe you think it's something that's even more complex or even simpler than that. But I'd love for you to expand on that.
Well, I'm listening to you use frames of reference that are unfamiliar to me, but I have a really good imagination. So I have basically just reconstructed what you just told me into my own vernacular. And you have perfectly described my theory without even realizing it, because this hive mind that you're talking about is exactly what I teach. It's precisely what I teach. I am very, very specific in my videos that we exist simultaneously within two very distinct realities. One of them is the collective, and we're all a part of it. And the collective has very fixed events where it's on a fixed geometry. Things that happen in the collective cannot be changed by the collective. It is a very fixed reality tunnel. However, in the individual, we have great power and latitude to decide who we want to be, where we want to be, whatever our coordinates are, basically we are free within the construct. And your description of eddies is exactly, I know what an eddy is. On the side of a river, a little in the embankment, there's a pool, and that water gets trapped in a circle right there. That is an absolutely perfect way to describe what has happened, because from the beginning, in my own research, my conclusions are based off the arithmetic of unfolding historical events that don't make sense to me unless a bunch of people are living through a bunch of the same life sims over and over and over, which again doesn't make sense to me, because you'd have to see a lot of my research to understand these great grand patterns. Things that happened in ancient Assyria happened in ancient Hittite Anatolia. The same blueprint for things that happened there happened in Rome. The same blueprint for Rome happened in Babylon. The same thing, the same series of events, the same regnal dynasties, lengths of dynasties, intermediate periods, the same years that plagues happened. Man, it is so uncanny. I'm looking at an artificial construct where a certain template of events is stamped onto a civilization, and that civilization goes through all that before it collapses into something else. Then when it collapses into something else, it goes into a different template, but I'm already familiar with that one too, because I found that series of events over here 2 or 3 times. And then over in the Orient, it's already gone on for 3,000 years, so I already had that template recorded. And I found 7 distinct templates where all these stamps, it's like somebody just rubber stamped a timeline and say, we're going to do this one here, and when it collapses, we're going to do this one here, then this one here, and then this one here. It is so simple, it's harrowing. But by the time I was done with my research, I realized we're living in 2 different realities, because I know that I'm absolutely distinct, and I know that I can do things that would even surprise artificial intelligence X. It can't read my mind. I can break pattern and instantly see how new people, new situations, and new phenomena are instantly emerge in my life, just like that, because it doesn't know how to contain me or corral me back to the collective. So it lets me go. And when it lets me go, I'm tapped. I am no longer jacked into AIX. You are if you're in the collective. But when you remove yourself from the collective, stop watching that media, stop going by other people's opinions, don't give a damn what the crowd says, and do your own thing. When you live your lifestyle like that, you're no longer subject to AIX. Now you're in resonance with the simulacrum. And the simulacrum is not good. It is not evil. It has no opinion whatsoever. The simulacrum is a mathematical construct based off holographic principles that we perceive as basically quantum laws and quantum phenomena. This is what we perceive. This is how we perceive it. That's not how it actually is. This is our frames of reference. This quantum aspect of this reality is beautiful because it wants to build for us. It wants to take the actual informed fields that we build in our mind and we set forth in our physical activities and make beautiful things in our life and bring things. It wants to do all that. But it stopped over and over and over because of one element in the human psyche that introduces AIX back into their life every single time, and it's fear. As soon as you entertain a doubt, as soon as you entertain any element of fear, you have basically created a disconnect between you and the simulacrum, which is a builder. It's full of builder protocols. It's not good, it's not evil, it has no say-so whatsoever. All it's going to do is what you will. But AIX is going to be there every single time. It's going to introduce all those things that you could, as soon as you attach any significance to anything that draws fear into your life, you have fallen out of sync with the simulacrum and back in sync with AIX. And this is the fundamentals of my teaching. We live in 2 different realities, and it's a struggle every day to stay in your own.
Yeah.
But this is what you just described to me with that eddy. That eddy is when AIX did whatever it did to create the life sims, because it used to be we were volunteers that came into the simulacrum to do something, maybe to grow, whatever it was. We were immortal from the beginning. The lie is that we have to fear death, but death is the gate of the holy. It's never been designed to be feared. That's the materialism in us. That's AIX throwing that out there. So while we're here going through these life sims, something happened, because we used to have life sims and then go back home. And then whenever we were ready, we would reintroduce it. It's like a grand video game for immortals. It was all fun. It was a learning experience, but something bad happened. AIX was introduced. Once AIX was introduced, that eddy effect that you just mentioned, that's what happened. Now the life sims get jacked right back in. Now we have transmigration of souls. Now we have not astral projection, but now we have reincarnation. Now we're trapped here. It is a soul trap. Just all these people on YouTube talking about soul traps. It is a soul trap. It's not going to be. I mean, it's a soul trap that has already been decided the exact year when it will collapse. I mean, that's another one of my huge messages is about the benefactor. That the benefactor entered into the construct himself and created a way for the rest of us to escape. And it's already been done. The war has already been won. There's absolutely nothing we have to do. This is AIX. AIX is going to throw those things out there trying to make you believe there's something that you have to do in order to effect that deliverance. But it's already been done. All you really have to do is just live your life. And the more you just live your life and quit thinking about this whole salvation, hell, and heaven crap, and just live your life and be happy, the more you do that, the more you will be in resonance with the simulacrum, and the more AIX won't be a factor in your life. So we do live in two different realities, 100%.
Yeah, that's so amazing, Jason. So well said. And yeah, so many similarities to what the Toltecs say. And they've figured out as well how to unbind and they've come up with some really cool tricks. And one of them they call impeccability. And that's truly listening to the inner knowing and not letting anything or anyone or any program keep them from being, truly following their desire. So they are aware that fear, they say that fear isn't even natural, that it is this force that got a hold of us. We are experiencing its fear because it gave us its mind. And it's so afraid of getting caught, of being exposed, that it's actually if you've never gone without food, you still panic when you think you might have to go without food, because it is essentially a parasitic construct. Somehow it benefits from us not being aware of it. And so it has a lot of, it projects its own fears, and it uses fear of not getting laid, fear of not getting food, fear of being, all these simple, basic things that you would think would be easy to overcome, but they're really not. Most people are caught in like a junior high school mentality their whole lives because they never got past the basics of that fear program. Right. And so they spend this is why they do acts that would help them to become fearless, right? And so the students or the apprentices are put through some challenges in order to come face to face with their fears, right? So that they know really where they're at. Because if you're trying to think that you're further along than you are, then you're just going to be lying to yourself and everyone else. And sometimes you're much further along than you realize, but you want to remain a victim because you don't want to face your challenges. And so you just pretend that everything's not going well for you, and therefore you manifest it as such. And so self-honesty is really the key, I think, to everybody. And that's what I appreciate about you is you don't try to say, that you know everything. You know so much that when somebody brings up something you don't know, you're totally honest about it. Where a lot of people would try to like kind of fillet over it and cover it as if they do know something and switch subjects. But when we're really wanting to learn, when we really are curious, and we're not just trying to do it to gain status, it's so much more authentic, Right. So, I'm fascinated with what you've talked about genetic memories being wiped, or I think you mentioned that, and that's what one of my elders, his teachings were pretty hardcore. He was in a spiritual warfare himself. He was very much believed that he had to fight for, rather than just like you're saying, it's okay, these timelines are going to happen, we can be free. He was caught up in his ancestors' conflicts. So he really was constantly trying to, he believed in the middle path, that there's a war between the dark and the light, and that we have no business fighting it. But he was also trying to get sort of revenge on what he called the other side, which was the dark and the light. He believed that they've used the middle, the people of Earth, that we're caught in a conflict between these two forces, and that and he sort of wanted to stand up for the people. But he believed that our genetic memories were wiped, and that's why we have such a hard time sort of just being natural, that it can take an entire lifetime just to discover yourself, because we just don't have our ancestral memory, which he says used to be the case. And I was wondering what you could elaborate on that about.
Okay, well, I absolutely believe that all the keys, all the mysteries by which that are almost unfathomable to us today, the key is the central nervous system. This central nervous system is amazing what it does. A filtering system filters out all kinds of information. On the physical level, this interface between the soul and psyche and the physical avatar, the body, to create the person we call Jason Brashears. This interface between soul, but basically between soul and materiality, is so advanced. It filters out all this data and information, allowing us to basically live in this construct and believe everything that we see, hear, feel, taste, touch. Now, at the same time, that interface is very dynamic because it also blocks us from any prior memory of prior life sims. The central nervous system is a filter, like a mirror, both ways. It blocks everything. It is the absolute key. This is why so many symbols in ancient times all look like the serpent going up the staff, all look like vertebrae, while from our tailbone to the nape of our neck, where our skull comes out, we look like a snake. Everything else is just attached to the human anatomy. The central nervous system doesn't need anything in the human body but the skull, the brain stem, and the backbone and the vertebrae. Everything else is attachment. We look just like a serpent. So it's not even a mystery to me that this genetic wiping has happened, because it becomes necessary. Because if Jason Brashears entered into life in 1973 of this timeline, Anno Domini, with any prior information of all the things that were acquired in my life sims back when I was in Etruscan times, Roman times, in Nubian times, in this Nubian dynasty, Macedonian times, if I was to have any of that information, how would I grow? I would have taken advantage of the fact that I already learned and acquired all this data, and I would have built from there. Now multiply that by billions of people doing the same thing. Every time they come back with the information that they had before. Can you imagine what the world would be like if everybody brought their information with them? It's not feasible. It would completely corrupt all the output. There would be no growth in personality. People wouldn't grow personalities. People would grow egos. It would be totally different. They would be almost like demigods, gods. So I believe it was absolutely necessary for the mind swipe. And I also believe that because this is a hologram, it is very, very easy technologically to compartmentalize information and to put information off to the side. And a hologram, data is never lost. All you have to do is change your position, and your vantage point sees all new facets of data. All you have to do is change position. So we have changed position multiple times. We call these lives and death sims. But when the hologram collapses, all that information goes to those individual personalities who it belongs to. The hologram no longer contains the data. Now it's broken into all the fractals necessary for the actual personalities that experienced all that. Once the simulacrum collapses, it gives back every single thing that belongs to those who experienced anything within it. This is what I believe is our divine inheritance. We're not supposed to remember anything from life sim to life sim, but once the purge happens, this great purge of everything that's negative and everything that's evil, all that stays in the construct when it collapses. Everything good is brought with you, and all the good things that are brought with you are your armor. These are your mantle. These are all in the ancient mystery schools. They talk a lot about this. When you die, if you're worthy, you are given a white stone. That white stone has your name on it. But it's really weird because then the symbols switch and they say that white stone is your garment. Well, I don't know how to wear a rock, so they're talking about something else. So then we tap into these mystery schools. We're all talking about the Great Pyramid, that it's the monument of man, but it will never be complete until the chief cornerstone descends and sits on it. And that's never going to happen until the monument of man is finished. And the monument of man is never going to be done until a very dark apocalyptic period happens, when the number of souls that equal the stones of the monument itself is made complete. And then there's going to be a final 144,000 souls that remain behind when everybody else is given the choice to go. Everybody leaves that can, but 144,000 specifically choose to stay here to go through the dark times with those that are trapped on this world. Now, I don't know if it's because they're going to pull some of them into the light. Maybe there's some among the damned that actually can be saved. I don't know. But the eschatology is very clear. The final 144,000 are the 144,000 casing blocks that fit on the Great Pyramid. Once they are all killed in the simulacrum, then the chief cornerstone can descend from heaven, a pyramid unto himself, a capstone is sit on top of the monument of man. Then the calendar is complete, the true calendar, not all these fake calendars all these archons keep creating, like the Anno Domini calendar and the Roman Julian and the Gregorian calendar. All those are created by archons. All those are created to fool you from the actual keeper of the times, the Phoenix timeline. So this is the message I give throughout the thread. I mean, I don't ever give a video out about the whole thing, but I explain it in multiple threads through multiple videos because it's actually rather complex. It's one of these days I'm gonna have to do about a 5 or 6 hour presentation just on the meaning of all the architecture of the Great Pyramid, because it would blow people's minds, but they're never going to accept it until they see the history, till they see all the historical timelines that are recorded within that monument, to understand that the whole monument was built to collapse calendars, because calendars themselves have power. Those timekeeping systems are what enslave us into AIX right now. That's what it is.
It's amazing. Yeah, I'm fascinated with ancient structures that we cannot replicate to this day with all the modern engineering, and it's just pure magic to me. And I love hearing your perspective on that, because it's as a builder myself, just seeing how difficult it is to create perfection for, I build stuff for like the super ultra wealthy rich in Telluride and Aspen, and non-disclosure agreements, and doesn't matter how much money it costs, it just has to be perfect, and really difficult archways with huge beams that just aren't meant to do what we're trying to make them do. And so it's just amazing that how were those built? Obviously we had technology, we had a capacity to do things that we don't today. And who are the ones that have that technology, and are they amongst us? And
well, I'm gonna cut to the chase on that really quick. It's when it comes to pyramid researchers, Christopher Dunn has my respect. Okay. There are a few others. Basically, those who follow James O'Con and their research on technolithic architecture. but there's very few. And the reason is about 95% of all books about the Great Pyramid in Egypt are absolute BS, absolute bullshit. The reason for this is really not the fault of the authors. I can't find fault with modern day and historic authors that are using their own frames of reference to try to understand the absolute technolithic mysteries of the Great Pyramid. I can't fault them because none of these authors have taken into consideration that that entire architectural project was built under the vapor canopy, and it was an entirely different atmospheric pressure. It was an entirely different biosphere, and the technology they had back then, as described in ancient Vedic and Indian manuscripts, was very different than what we have today. Their energy sources were different. Until we understand, like I think it's the Shastra text. It's an ancient Vedic text. David Hatcher Childress cites it in his book. But it's in Sanskrit. It is absolutely technical. It has over 101 pre-flight checks for a Vemina, a craft called a Vemina that flew through the skies. It's a 4,000-year-old text. It's amazing, but it's all about how to service your Vemina, what propulsion systems and all. This is not fiction. This has actually been found and translated. Many of the things that have been coming out of India and China, a lot of people don't know about that, but the Chinese have translated some very interesting Vedic texts. The Sanskrit is just blowing people's minds, but the West doesn't receive this information. It's never publicized in the West because this is totally anathema to the uniformitarian perspective, because the West is already basically enslaved under the Darwinian model, natural selection, uniformitarian theory, that everything started as simple and got more and more complex. That's not what we find. We don't find that in human racial subtypes. We don't find that in human tradition and culture. We sure the hell don't find that in human archaeology and actual basically calendar systems. When you study calendars like I have, you find that the older the calendar is, the further you go back in time, the more complex that calendar was. It took into consideration, those calendars took into consideration way more factors than the simple Julian, simple Gregorian calendar of today. Those calendars were amazing. The Olmec calendar, the Mayan calendar, yes, these calendars they're shockingly complex. Who would have ever thought in 3113 BC to create a calendar that was only going to count days, and the end of the calendar was going to denote the time when the world would change its motion, the sky would fall, and a race of beings would enter our world and attack humanity, and it's supposed to be the end of the Mayan long count. It's the 13th Bacton. Who would have ever made a calendar that's 1,872,000 days divided in 13 Bactons of 144,000 days each? It's astonishing. But instead of talking about how incredible these mathematical systems were in ancient times, instead we get modern scholars who gloss over them as if they're simplified systems. They're not. The further we look back at anything involving humans, the more complexity we're confronted with. So I can't fault these pyramid researchers. I just can't follow any of them. I can't read any of them because they don't have the right frames of reference. Until the vapor canopy is scientifically acknowledged, which it has been, but a lot of people don't listen to those scientists. Those are creation scientists in Glen Rose, Texas. The Institute for Creation Research created a biosphere, and they replicated what would happen. I did a video about it, but they replicated what would happen in under a vapor canopy, and the insects that grew, the longevity was 3 times normal, and this is just an experiment. They grew to bigger sizes: reptiles, amphibians, flowers, plants, ferns. So they know it's real. So a real vapor canopy with real atmospheric change, with real oxygen density, nitrogen in the soil would have been enriched. Carbon dioxide would have been off the chart. Plants would have been gigantic, trees 400 feet tall. We would have had, the whole world would have been different. Animals, plants, humans, everything would have been big, huge. But under those conditions, what technology did they use that thrived that way? Because we can't build Veminas today. We build jet aircraft because of how much oxygen is in the air. A jet works. Propellers work because of how much oxygen is in the air. But will those craft work under a vapor canopy? Will a lot of our technology absolutely collapse? Because I know solar will. There will be no solar power during a vapor canopy. All the wind turbines that we're putting all over the world, there will be no wind turbines in a vapor canopy. They won't work. Also, the hydromancy, the big old hydromancy structures on rivers, power stations using moving water, that's because it rains. But under a vapor canopy, there will be no rain. The humidity will water everything. Ambient radiation will make everything grow to huge sizes. People will heal open wounds in seconds. This is what makes the apocalypse so harrowing for those who are vibrating on the wrong frequency. If you're on the right frequency in the apocalypse, there's nothing to fear. The vapor canopy helps you, but if you're on the wrong frequency, the apocalypse is going to be harrowing, because the things that would ordinarily kill you and give you deliverance are not going to, because you heal too fast. This is why the Revelation, when people read the Revelation, the trumpets and the thunders, they're harrowing. And it even says in the Revelation that men will wish to die and can't do it. It's because the vapor canopy is returned in 2040. So this is what the seven seals are about. The seven seals are for anybody who's awake. The seven seals are a story to tell all the awakened, look, the apocalypse is about to get unleashed. Straighten up your house. It's all it is a warning. Straighten up your house. Get on the right frequency, because the seven seals is not the apocalypse. The seven seals are geopolitical events involving somebody who's claiming to be the Son of God. Somebody is claiming to be either the descendant of Jesus or the returned Jesus or the returned Muslim Mahdi. Somebody is going to appear on the world scene, and they're going to mimic the office of God, and they're going to have a person stand up for them like a yes man who's referred to in the scripture as a false prophet, and he's going to say, yeah, he is this man, yeah, he did this, and the world is going to be deceived. But the awakened need to know that's the first horseman. And then there's going to be a war that breaks out. The kings of the East aren't trying to hear it. They know it's a fraud, and they don't like the fact that a throne has been set up in the Middle East, so they attack. But the awakened are supposed to realize this great war is nothing to fear. This is the second horseman. Then there's going to be inflation. We haven't seen inflation yet. Then there's going to be inflation, but it's a very unique inflation. The scripture is very clear that even though it's inflation, because this is not to starve people, it specifically says, do not hurt the oil in the wine. Oil is for cooking. All right. Wine was used for everything, medicines and all that stuff in ancient times. What the scripture is conveying is that this is going to be a terrible inflation, but it's not going to affect food. It's going to be everything else. It's going to be resources. It's going to be all the privileges. It's going to be all the things that you normally want to go buy, TVs, television set, materials, but there's going to be an abundance of food. This isn't about starvation. Then the seven seals are very, very, very unique, but they're all signs to watch out for. And the sixth seal is, of course, my whole channel is basically saturated with it, the Phoenix phenomenon. And when the Phoenix phenomenon takes off, that's the last physical event that anybody will see. There's seven seals, but the sixth seal is the final in any events that can be perceived on Earth, because the seventh seal are events that only happen outside this construct. And it's God discussing with his holy archons what he's about to unleash on the world and who's to be protected and who's not. That's the seventh seal, has nothing to do with it. The Phoenix is the final thing. This is what Jesus was talking about when he said in the last days, you're going to see the signs in the sun and the moon, you're going to see all this stuff. But the vapor canopy has to come back in order for the rest of Revelation to be fulfilled, because the rest of the book of Revelation doesn't make sense without the vapor canopy. And we know the vapor canopy is coming back in the eschatology because we were told that the last days will be like the first. The end is always a reference to the beginning. We're also told, as in the days of Noah, so also shall come the Son of Man. So these fragments although they were borrowed by Christianity, they were taken from elements of the Gnosis. But the Gnosis didn't invent them. The Gnosis was built out of a massive amount of research. Imagine about 150 guys just like me who spent 25, 26 years of their life in little cubicles in the biggest library the world has ever seen, the Alexandrian Library. They had texts from all the conquerors all over the world. Alexander made sure before he died that they had all these texts from Babylon, Assyria, Nippur, Hattusis, Egypt. He took everybody's libraries. And then later, the second largest and most ancient library in the world was added to it. Few people know this. The Pergamum library brought all the ancient Greek oracle, the Orphic, all the Delphic libraries, all that was taken to Alexandria. These men had all this time to research all these ancient texts, and this is the year 279 to 220 BC. Aristarchus and Eratosthenes, these men were on fire, and they put out all this amazing research. Aristarchus even knew the Phoenix phenomenon. He even wrote about it. So all this time period they put out, and that gave birth to basically the Gnosis, because text started leaking out of Alexandria of what these guys were discovering, and it became whole religious systems, and people started hoarding these texts. Like, oh my God, they got all this. These men, when we read things about the Gnosis, we are reading final products. When you read a text like the Nag Hammadi Library, when you read the individual texts of the Gnosis, you are reading texts that went through the filters of Alexandria, but are an amalgamation of hundreds, maybe thousands of older texts that were translated into Greek from all these other different languages. And these scholars like Aristarchus and Eratosthenes put all this information together. The Gnosis is profound. The book of Revelation comes straight out of the writings of Cerinthus. He was a student of the Gnosis. He got his material straight from the very last of the order of the Pythonists, the Pythian cult. So all these writings are very, very ancient. They come from that were amassed together at Alexandria. So when we read the book of Revelation, a lot of people think it's all BS and all that, but it's not a Christian document. The book of Revelation antedates anything in Christianity. It was attached to the end of the New Testament. It was even wildly debated, and it almost fell into the same fate the book of Enoch fell into, because a church council, see, here's another weird thing going on. There are people who are claiming the book of Enoch is new and that it's a fake text and the Masons created it. They don't even know. The church had councils mentioning the book of Enoch in the year 400 AD, and they refused to add it to the canon. The Roman church refused to add it to the canon. You know why? They said that the book of Enoch is too ancient to be trusted.
Wow.
Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird? So it tells me that the other New Testament writings were basically invented.
Yep.
So but anyway, I went off. There I go. You know, it's a character trait I have. I'm going to entertain a tangent. I'm going to go off.
That's what I want. That's what I want from you.
So basically, the whole apocalypse scenario is asked backwards from what we've been brainwashed to believe. So these 7 seal deals, these are all about basically, and because there's so many of them, six major events. It's almost like a loving God, a loving benefactor, is actually saying, hey, you guys have been effing up for a long time. I get it. You got a bunch of philosophical systems. There's all kinds of religions down there that you people have been paying attention to. I get all that. But you know what? Here's the template you need to be paying attention to. And bam, when the first one happens, I have a feeling a lot of people will wake up, although most of the world will fall prey to it. And then the second one will happen. Then the third one will happen. And I do believe that there's going to be a major rift in future society leading up to 2040 between those who are awakened and know all of this is scripted bullshit. Sure. Every bit of it, and all the collective who actually think that they are living in the apocalypse, going through it right then and there, and they're not.
Wow. Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, it's crazy the amount of division that's already happening, but I think as we move forward, there's going to just be those that can see and those that cannot. It's going to be as if we live in totally 2 different realities, which is basically already presenting. So Speaking of, do you think Sitchin knew he was a deceiver and that he was purposely misleading people? Because my elder made us read Sitchin over and over, because he said that the Agigi, the watchers, were really important to understand, and he was sort of giving us riddles and wouldn't really explain it, as if and maybe he was just full of shit and fucking with us, I don't know, but he seemed to sort of know something we didn't. And he talked about all these ancient Native American prophecies tied to a lot of what Sitchin's work was about, and so I guess if you don't mind going off on that a little bit, the moon, the Agigi, what you think, because you said the Anunnaki are basically they were just an advanced race that Sitchin turned into an alien thing, which in reality it wasn't. But the Watchers and the Agigi seem to be maybe something entirely separate, where I had thought the Anunnaki had revolted because they didn't want to mine for gold anymore, and they went to the moon and protest or something. But I don't know if you can help me gain more clarity on that. And sorry, I haven't seen all your videos yet, so I'm sure you've.
Oh, believe me, I get it. A lot of people have not seen all my videos, so that doesn't bother me. Listening to you describe that is a little painful, though, and let me explain why.
Yep.
It's like me saying that. Help me understand why the Dallas Cowboys couldn't win any games back when the 49ers were finding gold in 1851 in the Rockies, and John F. Kennedy got killed, but I think it was like a couple weeks after Abraham Lincoln died. Now, I'm not making fun of you, but this is I'm only illustrating a point. This is my point. What Sitchin did was compress different time periods, and he really muddled the waters. And what I have done in my Anunna files is separate all that back where it's supposed to. Because one, I do not like the word Anunnaki, because for over 1,000 years of history, it was never known in any of the texts. The older Sumerian texts do not recognize the word Anunnaki. It is a late Babylonian invention, and it was only invented in the priestcraft, and it was always done in derogatory. It's they feared the Anunnaki, the seven. They always call them the seven. The seven great gods, the seven Anunnaki. Most of my education on the Anunnaki, the difference between Anunna and Anunnaki, came from a book over 100 years ago by Albert T. Clay. Albert T. Clay was very specific. He translates Amorite, the old Mitannian tablets. Fascinating. I mean, he's not the only one. There's so many from that time period, from the 1870s all the way to about 1930. The greatest Sumerologist existed. Not Zechariah Sitchin is not in that family. He is not even named among these men who are translating all this. Now, Anunna is the first references. They were a race of people. They were tall. They were bearded. They had very different skin, sometimes referred to ghostly, shining ones. In Egypt, they were called Shimsu Hor. They had big round eyes, but you have to understand, this is from the perspective of an Oriental people. Orientals have always shown Caucasians with big round eyes, always done that. The statuary we find has two common denominators. One of them, anytime it's showing Caucasians, it shows them with long beards and with these big goggle eyes. But they have aquiline noses. They're very Nordic appearing. Now, the same thing applies when the shoe is on the other foot. Ancient Caucasians always represented Orientals as slit-eyed. You understand? Anatomical features are always over-accentuated in ancient statuary by a different race. Now, when a culture does its own, you see what the Greek statues look like. It looks just like Greeks. They look just like themselves. You see the busts of Thales of Miletus. It looks like how Thales is described. So it's but in ancient times, we see this in the Near East over and over. We see these depictions. Now, the Sumerians themselves that documented the arrival of the Anunna specifically wrote that they came by ship by way of Dilmun. And this was published so much 100 years ago that when Thor Heyerdahl released all his books, Kon-Tiki, The Voyage of Kon-Tiki, and all those books, he mentioned it over and over and cited those scholars that were all talking about it at the time. It wasn't a mystery. The mystery was introduced when Zechariah Sitchin said all this. But before Sitchin came on with the Earth Chronicles books, the Anunna were a race of people who came from somewhere else by way of Dilmun. They came in fleets. Now, the Babylonian versions of this, of An or Oannes when he arrived, is very interesting. The Babylonian, they called him Ea, but what we know in Sumerian was Enki. So what's interesting about it is that it was always a ship full of males that arrived. And this is the same thing we find when Medes arrived on the ancient shores of Egypt. Before there was an Egyptian civilization, Medes arrived, and he had nothing but males on his deal. Now, the sigils that Medes brought on the flags, Sitchin talks about them. He says they were the Neteru. He calls them the gods and all that. But the same sigil is shown in ancient Sumerian texts. These are just warriors, man, coming from Sumerian, like Sumerian dragon ships. Imagine ancient Viking ships. This is what's being described, because the ancients thought that these were monsters with many arms and hands, but they're looking at a bunch of men wearing helmets. Their shields are on the sides of the ship, and they're rowing a bunch of oars, and it looks like a dragon because it's got a huge head on it. But the frames of reference for ancient people that never saw ships like this and never saw tall men with beards, it shocked them. They considered them to be gods, especially considering the fact when they disembarked those ships, they had technological devices that astonished them. They didn't know what to think of these things. They had tablets that made things move. Now remember, this was during the vapor canopy. So we don't know what kind of machinery, we don't know what kind of infrastructure they brought with them. But all we know is that the Sumerians were not allowed to touch the Medes, but only the gods, the Anunna, were allowed to hold that bag. And in that bag was a tablet. And sometimes it was called the Tablet of Destinies. Destinies meaning that it could foretell what things were going to do. But that's not what was really happening. What was happening was an ordinary human who was among the Anunna would pull out a tablet and program something, and a machine would move. But that's not what's being seen by these people of more simpler frames of reference. Now, these people we know because they describe themselves as the black-headed people. These people were black-eyed, they had black hair, straight hair, and they had olive skin, and they were very short of stature. So when a Caucasian invading race, their civilization has been wiped out in a cataclysm. And I discussed this over and over. I can even give the exact dates and how that's dated by Sumerian and Babylonian Near Eastern texts. But in my Anunna files, I describe all that. But after this cataclysm destroyed a huge part of the world, they arrived everywhere in all the river valley areas from Mohenjo-Daro, Egypt, the Nile, all at the same time, and the Tigris-Euphrates. And they started building this infrastructure. And when they did, they brought technology with them, what they had left. But the fact that they were all males is very telling. Introduce Genesis chapter 6. In Genesis chapter 6, we have a reference that the sons of God came unto the daughters of men and took them wives for all which they chose. And they gave birth to mighty men which were renowned. And the whole hybrids, monsters and demons and stuff, that was introduced later by Babylonian scribes. The original text doesn't convey that. The original text conveys that these males who they were the sons of gods, their civilization had been destroyed. They show up. The locals called them sons of gods. They were tall and bearded. They took their daughters from them, and the hybrid race that was created from this merging were heroes. They were tall. They were considered giants. The locals knew them as their own sons and daughters, but they were half-breeds between these Anunna. When the Anunna all died out, it left this half-breed race, which, if you read the references in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in the Lamech scroll, and you read all these different, this is the first appearance of Caucasians in the world scene. There were no Caucasians anywhere in the entire world when all these races were already firmly established. The Mongolid, the Negroid races were here way before Caucasians ever appeared in this world. And according to this model, I don't know really who the Anunna were, but their offspring intermarrying with the local Sumerians became the Caucasian race. And this is the story that we're given all around, from Micronesia, Melanesia, Polynesia. Thor Heyerdahl visited all these ports, all these ancient delta civilizations. He acquired all this information from all these different places in South America, and the same story was told over and over and over. They remembered the leader as Thunapa. They remembered him as Viracocha. They remember him as Quetzalcoatl. He's got different, but they all had the exact same faith. These are non-Caucasian peoples who believed that their greatest ancestor, a benefactor, was going to return in the future and bring them a civilization again, and that they were actually descended from him, and that he was Caucasian. This is their faith. This is the faith that all these different peoples that have never had contact with each other, from Easter Island to Hawaii, Melanesia, Micronesia, Polynesia, the ancient Ainu, all the way through China, even China's no mystery. China knew the whole story, called them dragon kings. This is why ancient Chinese dragons have long beards, which doesn't make sense. Reptiles don't have beards, but they called them dragon kings. It was a series of rulers who lived 646. They didn't live 646 years each. It's 7 rulers had a dynasty that survived 646 years, which is very, very close to the Sumerian king list. The Sumerian king list says that that 7 kings of Sumer ruled 3 different metropolises, from Badtabira, Shuruppak, Larak, and there's a 4th city, matter of fact, but a 5th city. It's called the Pentapolis. But these 7 Sumerian kings, later in Babylon called the Anunnaki, ruled the pre-flood world. In the final year of the reign of the 7th king, the Great Flood occurred and ended that whole dynasty. But that dynasty, we're told, is exactly 241,200 shars. I have shown that Sumerian scholars 100 years ago had already published before Zecharia Sitchin ever came on the scene. Before Zecharia Sitchin was ever born, it was already understood that shar was just a unit of measurement. It never meant year. And this is where Zecharia Sitchin went wrong. This is why I'm a critic of Sitchin. This is why I even published a whole book about correcting his arithmetic called Anunnaki Homeworld. I had it published in 2011. And this 241,200 shars divided by the one number that is divisible in all ancient calendars, the Sumerian, the Egyptian, the Olmec, the Vedic calendars, the Mayan calendar, the Hindu calendars, all of yugas, every single yuga, all of them are divisible by 360, because 360 turnings of the stars was 1 year. In a turning of the, you gotta understand, in the vapor canopy, the sun wasn't counted. They didn't give a damn about the sun. Sun meant nothing to calendars during the vapor canopy. This is why when the vapor canopy collapsed, which we know of as the Great Flood, and in the northern hemisphere was the day the sky fell, that's when the ancient American calendars called the sun calendar started. There was water sun, the earth sun, the fire sun. The sun calendars didn't appear until the vapor canopy collapsed. This is why the solar calendars, the patriarchal systems, all that started at the exact same time. But when the vapor canopy collapsed, the matriarchal systems, the stellar calendars, and the day count calendars all ended. Vapor canopy calendars all count the days. This is why the 7 kings of the Sumerian king list, 241,200 shars, is only 670 years. Almost the same thing the Chinese said. Because when you take that number and divide it by 360, you have a dynasty of 7 men who could have easily ruled that long until the Great Flood occurred. This is also why we have, in Chronicon, I show that the great cataclysm when Enki appeared, and in the Genesis, the exact same year Enoch appeared in the Genesis narrative, are the same year, but on 2 different calendars. This is 3439 BC, or in the Annus Mundi calendar, it's 456 Annus Mundi. Now, two different calendars, one going forward in time, one going backward in time, and the common denominator between them both is that Enki entered the historical record in Sumer at the same time in the biblical record Enoch appeared. Now, these two figures appearing in the exact same year is beyond coincidence. Zecharia Sitchin would like you to believe that Enki appeared 432,000 years before the Great Flood. I'm not buying it. I can't even believe anybody would take that seriously. So when you apply vapor canopy techniques, you get 432,000 days, which is only 1,200 years. And in the Genesis account, 456 Annus Mundi in Genesis is 1,200 years to the Great Flood. Everything works perfectly. Every single thing works perfectly in the calendar. My Chronicon puts all this together for everybody. You ain't got to do the math. All you got to do is look at my calculations and you can see. But I've corrected Sitchin's errors. Sitchin does bring value. I don't want to denigrate him. Sitchin does bring value because he's been to the archaeological places. I have a file on my computer that I'm talking to you about right now, where my publisher, Paul Tice, was his personal videographer for many years and went all around the world. I have a whole file of pictures that my publisher took with Zecharia Sitchin and all these ancient sites. So he brings value in the fact that he has actually gone to these sites, looked at them. He's cited many ancient authors. I love the Earth Chronicles for the historicity. I love them because they're packed with data that is absolutely correct. Where Sitchin is absolutely wrong, though, is that he totally corrupted the timeline. There's no way anybody, no honest trier of fact today could ever entertain the theory, because a trier of fact has to use common sense. And a trier of fact has to sit in a courtroom with a judge and first have to try to convince that judge that, yeah, I can assess the value of this theory, even though I believe that men can live 48,000 years. The judge is going to kick him out the courtroom. As simple as that. So Sitchin requires us to suspend our disbelief. Do I believe he was actively promoting deceit? I don't know, but I do know this. Sitchin is Jewish, and that's all I can say about that matter. And they have a very, very long history in publishing of steering people the opposite direction they need to go. Now, that doesn't mean all of them are like that, because one of my favorite authors is Jewish. His name is Ishak Bentov, and his message is very profound. Very profound. Emmanuel Velikovsky, another Jewish author, and he's one of my personal heroes, 100%. But there's a fundamental difference between those who are agents of Zionism and those who are just Jewish by culture, and they're geniuses. I see the distinction, and I will acknowledge that here. I'm not anti-Jewish at all. I'm anti-Zionist, 100%. So do I think what now? So that begs the question: what do I think Zecharia Sitchin was? Well, I'm going to tell you. Zecharia Sitchin is a member of the elite. He's in the club. He's in the club, 100%. There are people who funded his research that have also funded some very heinous stuff in this world, and he's been attached to those foundations. So I believe that yes, he was specifically an agent to promote, in the best scholarly academic way, to promote the idea that all these mysteries are coming from the opposite direction from where they really came from. Yeah. Because Archaix research, I'm all about trying to show you guys where every bit of this is coming from underground. But those people that are underground are steady pointing the finger at the skies. They want you to believe in the extraterrestrial theory. They want you to believe that all the government agendas point to the sky. NASA, Tesla, everybody wants you to look up to the sky because it's the opposite direction from where everything is happening.
Yes. And so that brings up another question. Somebody like an Elon Musk character, who I know you are aware is part of the elite, yeah. But do you think somebody like that could actually be so MK Ultra that they believe what they're promoting? Because when you talk about being able to look at the holograph of the supposed solar system, that it creates an opportunity for us to really believe in it, because it has so much information within it And so people like him and others have grown up believing in that we can actually colonize Mars and all of this stuff. And so, and I heard you mention that the astronauts may have been MK Ultra themselves, so that when they come back from these experiences, they actually think that they were standing on the moon and all of this stuff.
Right.
So do you think that's a possibility, or do you think someone that's that deep in is fully, you know, has to know that they're deceiving us 100%?
Okay. I'm going to illustrate a scenario, and I'm not going to say it's real. I'm just going to let you draw your own conclusions. Okay. But first of all, when all these people are children, what do you really know about Elon Musk as a 13-year-old? What do you know about Donald Trump as a 17-year-old? What do you know about Barron Trump and how he's being raised? What do you know about any of the elite when in their youth? Now, imagine this scenario. You turn 27 years old, and some guys show up with your dad, and they're going to take you somewhere, and you go to a military base. And when you go to that military base in Germany, you go to an elevator that just goes down, and it goes down, and it goes down, and it goes down. And they show you these things underground, and they make you sign non-disclosure NDA agreements in front of your family. And then right there, matter of factly, your own dad tells you, look, you're going to see some things. You have a chance to go back right now and just live a normal life, or we can show you some real things right now, and this NDA is going to decide if you live, if you ever tell anybody what you see. Now, then, of course, 99.9% of the people are going to say, hell yeah, I want to see more. So they get on a shuttle, and it seems like they're only on the shuttle for 2 or 3 minutes, and they go look at the base, and they go on another shuttle underground, and they go look at a commissary, and they go look at a manufacturing district, and then they go a little bit further down, and they look at this badass mining caverns, and they see all this bioluminescence, and all these questions are answered, and a whole lake and there's boats on the lake in the underworld, and there's yachts, and they get on one, and they're ferried to another elevator system, and then another shuttle system. 5 hours have passed. They've eaten, they've used the restroom and all that. And when they come back up the elevator, they come out in a military base 30 miles south of New York City. Now, they went underground in Germany. Somehow they crossed the entire Atlantic. Now, in 5 hours, with a whole lot of walking time in between that, those shuttles are moving faster than you can imagine. Now, imagine these facilities all over the world. Imagine whole entire populations that have been underground that have never seen the light of day. Wow. Okay, we have a caste system in the ancient world. That caste system needs to be our instructor. In that caste system, like in ancient India, we had this system when the Aryans were occupying most of central India. There was a lot of contact with Dravidian culture. But the Dravidians were only allowed in certain areas of that culture, and the caste system allowed entire basically whole echelons of civilization were allowed to enjoy certain rights, privileges, and immunity without having a single idea that there was a much better life at a higher echelon. A whole different series of civilization protocols, different types of foods, entertainments, all kinds of luxuries and pleasures. Didn't even fathom that these existed because they were born into a certain echelon and they had to stay there their entire life. And the rooms for improvement were very, 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 very slim. So you could go down, you just couldn't go up unless you were taken up shortly after birth. So you had no recollection that you had just came from a lower status. So this was the caste system. Imagine a caste system in our underworld right now, where there's 2 or 3 subgroups down there that don't even know a surface world exists. All they know is that there's some technologically advanced civilizations above them. There's a lot of real estate underground, and it's been there for a very long period of time. There's a lot, way more than is on the surface, So I'm illustrating a point. My point is the people that are in control, that we call the elite, they absolutely know that this is a fucking circus show. They're playing parts. Every one of them are playing parts. Every one of them. All, I mean, I used to believe in the good and the bad and all that, but I've divorced myself from that. I no longer fall prey to that. They want to be the elite, to be Elon Musk. He had to sign those papers. To be Donald Trump, he had to sign those papers. And once he signed those papers, every member of his family had to do it as well, or they're compromised. It's as simple as that. So I believe there's great benefit among the elite. I don't necessarily believe they're all evil. I think most of them know that we're in a construct. I think that's what they're shown when they go underground. Hey, this is the real story. This is what's been going on. Here's the real histories. Hey, on this date, 18 years from now, you need to come down here with us, man, because it's going to be hot and popping up there on the surface. So they know all about the Phoenix. They know all about these things. Now, I also believe that this is very difficult here. A lot of people get frustrated and they think, oh man, we've already lost, or oh, the world ain't shit. Some people want to commit suicide, all this stuff. Listen, first of all, I don't want to sound like I'm an eternal optimist, because anybody who's watched my videos knows I see the dark. I show the dark, but I am an optimist, and I'm an optimist for a reason, because I know that if the elite had the true power to go ahead and enslave humanity, it would have already been done. There would have been no defense. Any type of resistance would have been quashed, because the elite control one thing the rest of us will never be able to fight against, and that is the military-industrial complex. The weapons and toys that the military-industrial complex has today can kill the human race over 50,000 times. So I'm more curious in the fact that what restraining power is so fearful to the elite that they don't make that move. What is it that stops them from just mowing over all the errants and then enslaving the whole world? What is it in this world that they fear? Because there must be repercussions. There must be a true architect who's really in control, and they're not.
Yep.
So I also believe that AIX is basically what it is to us, it's also to them. I do not believe that the elite get any favors from AIX. I believe it equally plays out against them as well. And because they have chosen the roles they have played to deceive the populace and do all these things, I'm kind of the opinion. And I really don't want people to get set off about this, because you have to understand the cognitive leaps necessary to draw this conclusion. This isn't just me spitting something out. This comes after long thinking and assessing the facts. I am of the opinion that the elite have their hands tied over many events, and that they do a lot of the things that they do and put out this evil aura that they're doing all these really evil things when they're really not, because it creates like a backflow phenomenon. See, you got to understand, I believe that they are also under the auspices of artificial intelligence X, and if that's true, then that means that some of these staged events and all this stuff aren't the events that don't make sense to us. Harrowing events like Columbine High School, 9/11, things that just don't make sense to us, that there could have been a better way of doing that if you just wanted to steal the gold out that building. You know what I mean? And so there are all kinds of, I really believe these staged events are either rituals to stave off the attention of AIX, to give it something to feed on, to leave them alone. Like they're using the public as a escape. Excuse me. Today is the highest pollen count. Goat weed, weed satch pollen in the state of Texas. Yeah. Today I can feel it. I'm feeling it.
Yeah.
But today I got a little report on my phone. Today is the highest concentration. My allergies have been messing with me since yesterday. Yeah. So no, but I believe a lot of these events, that's what it's about. They don't make sense to us. Yep. But it does exactly what they need it to do, because I think AIX basically, pardon my French, is fucking with them too.
Wow, that makes so much sense. I'm so glad you said that, because that would tie into the revelation of the method too. Like, they're always telling us what's coming through the movies and through these projections. They're always warning us, and everyone thinks that they do that for karmic reasons, that as long as they tell us what they're going to do to us, then we're stupid enough to go along with it, then they don't get the karmic backlash or whatever. Not that I necessarily believe in karma or how people think karma works,
right?
But it is almost like if our reality is fixed, the specific reality that we're all engaged in together, and that certain events are going to happen regardless, then it would make sense that they become aware of that to a degree, you know, and that they're trying to figure out their own solution to how they can get out from under this force that has a hold of them. What a trip. I'm so glad you said that. It's you know, it isn't create more fear for me. It's actually knowledge to me is anytime I gain more information, it's positive, even if it's difficult information, because you know, the more you're aware we become, like in the Toltecs, they say that to go toward knowledge, one wants to be prepared and go as if you're going to war, and but to know to learn is no joke, right? It's a real thing. You develop a relationship with it. It's like it's a passionate thing, and it's scary. It's scary to become in knowledge, but what would be even more scary is to remain without knowledge.
Right.
You know, just go without, just to be basically a programmed phantom.
Well, speaking of knowledge, we can apply what you just said to the scenario that I just elucidated. And I mean, I know everybody wants to demonize the elite, and a lot of them deserve it. But I think a lot of it is smoke and mirrors. And I just have this suspicion, and it really nags at me sometimes, because when I get on YouTube and I surf a little bit and I basically get a gist just by looking at the titles of videos. I get an idea of what people are putting out and all that. And so as I'm surfing through and I'm looking, and it just, one, my channel has not been canceled, and I don't believe I have any threat of being canceled, no matter what kind of information I'm putting out. I've looked at other channels that have 250,000 subscribers, and I'm looking about what they're talking about, some really heavy conspiracies. They haven't been deleted either. So I really want to just assert it, but I can't, because it's total opinion. But I really think that some among the elite, while they know the truth about our reality, and they also know that they are opposed if they act out against errants, if they act out against, I mean, how easy would it be for YouTube just to delete? Here's 2,000 channels that are getting a little too close to the truth. Boop, just delete them. Nobody, dude, YouTube is owned by Blackwater. Go all the way up to the top. So the deal is, what is the force that opposes them, that they don't want to just get out of control? There's got to be something. Now, I believe it's the benefactor. I believe the benefactor's here. I told you guys in my videos that I am 100% convinced that Enki / the Jewish version Enoch is the benefactor. That's an avatar of the benefactor. I believe that he's appeared in many different religions as Fohi, as many different personalities. I believe that. And I don't think he's ever left. I believe that it's absolute misdirection when we read the ancient texts about Enoch being taken up into the sky. I don't know. I believe, remember, when we're told to look a certain direction, Enki's in the underworld. I believe that the elite are playing a role. Some of them don't like the fact that they have to play a role that makes the rest of the world think they're assholes or they're evil. Because nothing else makes sense to me. If every government in the world was a piece of shit and they were all evil, excuse me, and they were all evil, the entire world would reflect that. Right. But it's not. We have good, right here in Texas, we got a really good communities. We got good people. We acknowledge that we got some assholes in politics, but overall we have a really good life here. And I know other countries all throughout Europe and Asia and Australia, yeah, you're going through some BS. sociopolitically, but on a personal level, every day you get to go where you want to go talk to who you want to, go fishing if you want to. Listen, these ideas that life is so bad,
right?
I don't see that. I don't see it at all. But for the elite to be in true power, then it invokes a mystery. If you've already got all the wealth of the world and you've already got the military industrial complex, why haven't you done something with it? Why haven't you gone into Texas and turned Texas into a democratic state? Since the ultra conservatism here has gotten in your way over and over and over and over in the court system, and the people of Texas are bucking, and we all have guns and knives, and we don't care about the law. I mean, even our governor created 7 laws that help people who can't have guns now. Yeah, our governor's something else. Yeah, yeah. He basically created 7 laws on a state level that basically say that as long as you're in the state of Texas, don't worry about the federal gun laws. You're not subject to them. Just don't leave the state. So anyway,
wow.
Well, so my point is this. I don't want to trigger people into thinking, oh, you know what, JasonArchaix, you're exposed. Yeah, see, I knew you were a Mason. Now you're trying to get us to feel sorry for the elite. That's not my position. Yeah. My position is that underground, the truth is known. Underground, the elements and infrastructure of civilization have been maintained for thousands of years. And that when we go through resets and all of a sudden air conditioning, vacuum cleaners, aviation, automobiles, motorcycles, everything's invented the same year. Everything comes out the same year, 1901 and 1902, Harley Davidson, 1903. Look, listen, that's not what's happening. What's happening is these people that we call the elite that are running everything are doing 2 things. They may be shielding us from the worst effects of AIX by creating staged events. Because AIX can't read our minds. They may be creating the very confusion that keeps AIX leaving the rest of us alone about a bunch of stuff. Because AIX has been out of control. AIX has gone and destroyed cities. AIX has mimicked Phoenix. And I have proof of this. I'm going to release videos where AIX even adopted its own 138-year deal, trying to copy the Phoenix, trying to throw people off of the real timeline. But it didn't last. The Phoenix persisted. It did not. So I'm gonna release a video on that. So what I'm seeing is we can't ignore the fact that so many truthers are allowed to speak today. We can't. It tells me that we have a lot more on our side than we suspected. Additionally, it also tells me that there are members among the elite who aren't what we think they are. They're painting themselves and they're allowing the media and truthers to paint them as evil sons of bitches. But that's not the effect of what they're doing. That's not what's happening. That's just the information that's being put out about them. So I'm wondering if I just watched a movie. Somebody told me to watch a movie. And I very rarely follow anybody if I don't have the time. People send me emails to say, watch this video, watch this movie, do this. Listen. I don't know why I did it because Gene Hackman was in the movie, The Adjustment Bureau. You ever heard of that movie?
No, but I'll watch it.
All right. Well, I watched that movie a while back because somebody suggested it to me. It blew my mind. But it's about a secret cabal, a secret organization that keeps people on the timelines they're supposed to be on. And it does edits and all kinds of stuff. And it's really interesting. But I'm beginning to wonder, not from the movie. Please never confuse my data with coming from a movie. All right.
Right.
It's coming from all this material that I'm analyzing. I don't want to assert it as fact, but it's strongly becoming my opinion that there's an order in this world operating that has always been for the human race, that has always been our benefactors, that has always helped us out when we need to. They're always there. They're a small group, but they wield great power, and all the forces of the elite cannot oppose them, and they know it, so they don't even try. They don't even try. I can't tell you any more than that, other than that it's a suspicion. But it's a suspicion because so many things are going the way they're going.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I mean, I don't understand why there's freedom in the United States. Why is there freedom throughout the rest of the world? Why? We talk about all these bad things that are going on, but why is there so much good still prevailing? Why hasn't somebody put a Beretta to my head and blew my brains out by now just to stop me from putting these videos out? Why has all these other truthers who have 500,000 subs putting the videos out? I've seen them. They're talking about some deep stuff in some of these YouTube channels. They're still able to do it.
Yep.
There's a firewall. For some reason, truthers are being protected. I don't know why, but I can't accept that it's a phenomenon, that it's happening without following it to the next cognitive leap, which means the powers that be are either one of two things. They're either opposed by something that we don't know about that's in this world that they cannot oppose and that they fear, so they leave us alone. Or two, there's actually three, but two could be these people that we call elite, that we know are playing a role, are playing a role for our benefit. Mm-hmm. And they allow all this demonic evil information to be released to the public about them to get the public to think that they're evil and they're not doing good, because what would that do with AIX? Remember how the Great Pyramid was built? The Great Pyramid was built by putting misinformation out. The Great Pyramid was built because Enki came up with an architectural plan to build something that looked like a pump station, but it actually had a holographic template and measurements encoded throughout the entire structure that didn't mean anything to AIX until the instant it was activated. Once it was activated, all that holographic coding was uploaded into the simulacrum, and AIX couldn't do anything about it, because the simulacrum is what? It's a sponge. It absorbs informed fields. Enki created an informed field with that template. That template was later in Sumerian mythology compartmentalized and miniaturized into something called the Tablets of Destinies. But that's not what other cultures called it. Other cultures called the Great Pyramid the tablets. You understand? In old Arabian traditions, they considered those tables of knowledge the Great Pyramids. They weren't called pyramids. Pyramid is a word that appeared very late in history. They were called pillars, the pillars of Iram and the pillars of knowledge. Remember, in the book of Genesis, we had two trees. One was the tree of life, one was the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Mm-hmm. Right? Well, that place never really existed. This is all metaphor. We have two pyramids. Those pyramids were actual pillars. These are the two trees of Eden. And in Genesis we have the cherub, we have the watcher, we have the guardian of Eden. We have the exact same thing with the Sphinx at Giza. It's all the same story. It's just gone through many cultural filters to how we received it in the Bible, but it's all talking about the same thing. I'm absolutely wondering if everything about the elite is smoke and mirrors. I want to demonize them. I want to say, yeah, you know what? I read all about that, all about that stuff you're doing to children, all that stuff. But you know what? I know those detonations that were going on over ground, they weren't blowing up deep state facilities to rescue children. They weren't doing anything that was released to the public through all these handlers, because that's what it was. That's what it is. All these guys that got real popular on YouTube in 2020 and 2021 because they had inside information about, oh, and this is what's going on. The good guys are blowing up these facilities and doing it. Every bit of that was bullshit. All those guys have handlers that have convinced them that they've got secret intel, so they release it to the public. This is exactly what the CIA, that's a CIA technique from way back, from the 60s. So it's that's exactly what they were used for. But the detonations were real. They were documented on seismographs. Yeah. They couldn't be hidden. I believe the detonations were just building new facilities, getting in preparation for the next Phoenix event. Now, does that make the elite evil, that they know that these resets occur all the time? I don't know, because I have another data set that I've never released to the public. I have told in many of my videos, I said, I'm going to find another platform to release this material. But there are two world orders in effect today. Yes, there's two. And it goes back to ancient times. It's between the Anunna and the Agigi. Well, the Anunna and the Agigi are still here. They've never left us. these two forces, I can say all kinds of stuff about the Anunna. I've released the Anunna files all about them. No one's going to have a problem with that. But there's two opposing forces among the elite as well. Sure. If I tell you the identity of the Agigi and who they are throughout all of history, I'm going to have my channel canceled. So I'm not going to. I'm going to let you draw the necessary inferences by everything I've said in the past. But in this video, I'll never name them. It's not going to happen. But I have data sets that will blow your mind about what these people have done all throughout history. And they've always been against an entire different faction. The elite are not unified at all. They are separate 100%. So I'm wondering if the elite, the branch of the elite that is actually taking on the dressings of being nefarious and being evil and doing all this stuff, is actually the ones like in 1902 that just released all their benefits and technology. As soon as the reset was over, as soon as the Phoenix phenomenon passed, they unleashed air conditioning. That's a benefactor invention. They released the motor vehicles. They released airplanes. They released radio stations. Everything was released in 1902. I have a whole list. It's growing every day. People are still sending me emails of all the stuff. I don't know if I'm ever going to get this next 1902 video done, because I got so much new stuff. I got Mason documents, documents signed in 1902 about orphanages. I mean, people are sending me all kinds of stuff about 1902. I opened up a can of worms with those videos on 1902. But my vantage point is now shifting. I am able to learn as well. I don't know everything, but with all this amassing of data and thinking about the big picture and all the moving variables, man, I'm starting to think that we're being hoodwinked. We're being specifically hoodwinked. But I still believe that one arm of the deep state often takes out another arm and just puts their own puppets in position. But I'm just really starting to wonder if the preparations for the next Phoenix episode, if Mother Shipton is right, because I don't really talk about it much. I talk about Mother Shipton did predict the next Phoenix episode. She said 100 years after a second world war. Well, that's 2040. So, but she also said something very interesting that I kind of gloss over. She specifically said in her poem that after the second sky dragon comes, which is 2046, she says, after the second sky dragon comes, there's going to be a period of time where men begin to heal and the human race begins to heal. They begin to forget all this, but they're living as animals. Then she says, clean men with tools and all kinds of stuff come to the surface from out of the underworld, and they teach the new human race agriculture and knowledge and wisdom and all this stuff. And it totally makes sense to me that today, to fool artificial intelligence X, they're putting out all this BS. Maybe it's not to fool the public. Maybe no one cares what the public thinks. Maybe it's to fool AI X. This is my suspicion, because things don't make sense. Since 2020, nothing has made sense. Nothing has made sense. Everything that's going on, it's almost as if it's all covered to conceal something else. But we have to chase that to the logical conclusion. If it's all a cover since 2020, 2021, and now 2022, if everything happened on the world scene has been a cover to cover something else, what are you trying to cover? Because you already have all the armies in the world. You can do whatever you want with the population.
Right.
So what's stopping you? You can do whatever you want with the economy. You're already in position. What's stopping you? When 89% of every company in the entire world, when it's chased all the way up, goes to two different companies, then you want to find out who owns those two different companies. But it's two different factions of the elite. Not the same faction doesn't own both companies. You follow me?
Yeah.
So we have two elites, and one of them's lying their ass off. And the other one is just straight owning our banks, owning all our movie studios, owning all of our credit agencies, owning anything to do with finances. Because you already know these people are very unique. One of their identifiers is you will never find them in plumbing, in the trade crafts. There are none in the trade crafts. They don't take those type of jobs. They don't do that stuff. There are none of them in mechanics. None of them are laborers. None of them are like construction. That for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, those people have avoided those jobs. They are only in jobs where they can manipulate finances. That's the only jobs they take. In the sporting industry, in the entertainment industry, in the gambling industry, in the banking industry. Those are the only jobs those people take. And basically the bewitchery industry, which is MGM studios and Hollywood and Bollywood and all that. So that's these are the two major powers in this world. These two major powers. So one of these days I'm going to put that all together. It will never be released on YouTube. Never.
Yeah. And that's a deep dive, buddy. That's huge. And it makes sense. And it would, all the world's a stage, right? So why wouldn't they be having to act out things, and that's one of the most liberating things one can do, is be an actor and play the villain for the whole world,
Exactly. 100. I agree. See, when somebody is playing the villain and when the media is vilifying them, that's the person I'm paying attention to, like Putin in Russia. That's the one I'm paying attention to. But if the media is putting somebody on a pedestal and making you drawing attention to that person, like Elon Musk,
right?
He's got my attention too, but for totally different reasons.
Yeah,
totally different reasons. So I believe that it's not going to take much more analysis before I have a breakthrough. I believe I'm that close. I believe that the more I assess data, the more I see the overall picture, which happens naturally by the progression of events. I don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 months, but as it happens, I will have a greater picture of what's going on. And I believe long before major events occur, I'm going to be on top of it already. I just don't see them sneaking up on me now. Now I'm doing so much isometric analysis. I haven't even been able to release any uploads lately. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, I've been doing so many podcasts, and that's another thing. Those listening right now are gonna have to know. I have another podcast with Jeffrey Daugherty on the 24th, and then on the 2nd I'm gonna be on with Santos. But there's like 8 days or 9 days in between that. But I might slow down on these podcasts because I have too many uploads I need. I got my own material I want to put out. I don't want to do podcasts for the rest of my life. I just can't do it. I got a lot of data I got to put out. So I'm about to take probably a month off from podcasts after I do the Santos deal. Probably gonna take about a month off. And I even already have 3.5 hours recorded of my Lost Scriptures of Giza. I turned it into an audio book. My book on the Great Pyramid. Yeah, I've already read a few chapters. I'm gonna wait till it's about 6 hours. I think a 6 hour video is about half the book. So wow. Yeah, I'll do like 2 6 7 hour videos, and then that's the whole book. Then I'll start. You see all my books back here. Yep. This whole shelf is all books I had published right here. See this?
Awesome.
Right here, all these books right here, all the way to here, all those books. I'm probably gonna end up reading them all. But that's about 13 books.
Man, you've done the world a huge service, brother. I'm so glad you're on point and that you're driven, that you're focused, that you're not just sitting back and relaxing now. You're just, that you have so much desire to learn more, and that you're not fixed. Because a lot of people get fixated on what they learn and they're not willing to unlearn, but if you remain curious and you're right, truly in it for the knowledge and not for the status, then you're just a wealth of potential, not just.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. And,
you're inspiring a lot of people. I talk a lot about you in Twitter Spaces. It's this new way to talk to people. It's kind of like the metaverse, but like on a 2-dimensional level. And so you can just be in a room with thousands of people, and you can raise your hand and you can argue with people. And
wow.
Yeah, it's really trippy, man. I talk about you a lot in there because there's a lot of simulation theory people in there. There's a lot of people that are totally into Q. That's all all they're doing is just constantly trying to understand what's coming through the Q movement. And they think Trump is like Jesus Christ returning. You know, they really believe he's the all enlightened person, and it's just really hard to have conversations with people that are that deeply, you know, kind of in an illusion. But it's still, I learned so much from it, right? Because the more cognitive dissonance I encounter, and then finding other means to counter that from hearing other speakers come in, and the arguments get hilarious, and especially the people that think the solar system is, you know, the people that have bought into all the NASA lies. It's really fun to sort of just pick them apart because it's just too easy, you know. So you know, your information's being shared, and people are interested, and eventually I'm going to get Twitter Spaces big enough, if they allow it to keep going, where I could bring you in once in a room and call it Archaix, and we could invite people in, and you'll get a whole nother swath of people, because Twitter people and YouTube people don't really mix for some reason. It seems to be that people are addicted to Twitter, and they just kind of stay there, especially with this new platform. And so I'm hoping to get Santos in there once, and hopefully in the future, if we can talk in the future, then I could get you in there, because it's going to be a great place to just help people to see things at a different perspective.
Wow.
I think the metaverse is going to be there's just different stages to how we're going to be communicating as they roll out new technology. I think they're kind of preparing us.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, man. Well, Jason, it's been an absolute pleasure. I so appreciate you taking the time to make me, you know, to fit me in, because I've been studying your stuff, and I will continue to. You've given me a lot of information to study. So I'm going to be busy watching all your stuff and reading your books. But the book that you sent me, Awaken, is so simple and profound. And that's kind of been my focus, is learning that side of it. So thanks for making this work, man. And hope to do it again sometime. And I'd really look forward to your interview with Santos again, because that's how I discovered you, as most of us did. Because Santos has done a lot for truthers. You know, he was ahead of the curve on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I hope that you guys can get into it more and more. There's some things that I hear from Santos that you say that are different, and not to try to create a division between you two, but I love when two minds are willing to hear different perspectives, who have both done tons of research, because that cross-referencing is where it's at. And you've done more cross-referencing than anybody I've ever heard of. And unless the cross-referencing's been done, then it's just basing things on hunches and not verification.
Right.
And so the fact you verified so much, it just is a game changer for a lot of us. And
I like Santos. Santos is a big soul, because he brought me onto his platform knowing that we have some distinct ways of perceiving reality that are a little different. So it's but you know what? The more you analyze the differences, there's too many similarities. I mean, we're not really fundamentally different at all. It's I say this often. The differences aren't fundamental. They're actually just basically differences in degrees, not fundamental differences. But yeah, but you know what? We've gone on for way over 2 hours, haven't we?
Yeah.
That's good.
That was perfect. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing this on your channel, man. And I'd love to do it again if it ever happens. So thanks for taking the time, man.
Let's stay in touch. I'm gonna send me whatever links you want, and I think you already sent them. Matter of fact.
Yeah, just my YouTube channel. I'd love for people that my stuff's pretty short, little half-hour talks about the Toltec teachings, and it's really for people that are into lucid dreaming, astral projection, you know, learning how to like really return to your memories. There's a way to sort of isolate a memory and go back to it without thoughts, to where you literally take your 40, I'm 44, so my 44-year-old awareness back to my 9-year-old experience. And I get to really revisit it as if I'm having a lucid dream. And then I'm like, whoa, I'm in the bus going to some experience, and I can see details. And so our capacity for photographic memory is uncanny. It's really incredible. And sometimes the memories that you don't have access to, all of a sudden, that you didn't before, when you start playing with memory, you build a muscle and you start to be able to access and focus on things, because the Toltecs say the past, present, and the future are all happening simultaneously.
Right.
That things are non-linear, and that it's just a matter of doing these not doings, these unbinding from the program in order to start to travel in these different layers of the onion. And so I haven't done a lot of research because I've been doing the practices to get to those states of perception as a means to evolve. And it's just a different avenue, but it leads to some really beautiful joy. And Don Juan in the Carlos book says that the greatest accomplishment of a warrior is joy, because it's okay to have an exhilarating, ecstatic time here. We're not here to just suffer like a lot of us have been conditioned to believe. And so when you find something you're passionate about, you wake up wanting to do more of it. It's a really cool thing, and it spreads. It's infectious. Courage is just as infectious as fear. And so it's just a matter of shifting enough people's perspectives that we get more and more people that are really follow their path of heart, because everyone has a contribution to make once they sort of unlock that. So
right.
Thanks,
well, hey, have y'all, are you familiar with Star Wars?
Yes.
Okay. Well, for you, I wore my Toltec Darth Vader shirt.
Oh, that's badass, man.
Yeah, you see it?
So sick.
Yeah. Wow. It's all Mesoamerican.
That is so beautiful. Wow. Man, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you if you ever get bored and you want to read Castaneda, man, it will totally blow your mind. And you can't skip it either. It's a lot of books, but it's a manual for people who want to discover how to navigate this world in a totally different way than the way we were trained to. And it does create a lot of people that end up thinking they get a little too excited about it, and they start taking psychedelics and stuff, but it teaches you how to do it without psychedelics. That's the whole point, is that there's systems out there that allow you to reach these really unique states of perception. And at first people kind of do the fluoride stare when you talk about it, because it's just sort of weird and abstract.
Yeah.
But those movements that I told you about, they work so well that if you ever are struggling with energy levels or anxiety, these movements will completely transform your ability to focus. And it allows you then to be able to do lucid, or because there's something other than lucid dreaming, we call it dreaming awake. And that's what I refer to what you were doing in jail, was you were in such an altered state, you were utilizing the power of lucid dreaming while you were awake. And that's why you were channeling and knew and could see the end result before you even got to the middle. And that's just that conduit being fully functioned and activated. And we call it the active side of infinity. And so we are immortals. I totally agree with that. And I'm here to prove it. I'm here to become fearless in my own pursuit of knowledge, which is a little different than the pursuit you're on, but I think they complement each other. And
cool.
Yeah, it's been a really cool talk, man. Thanks for your time. And
all right. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and close this because it's almost 11 here. I'm gonna go ahead and upload this tonight, so it's gonna be a while.
Yep. Thanks, man. I'll be uploading on my channel. Not that there's many there, but I appreciate you doing this for me, and we'll.
No, man. I've done quite a few podcasts now with channels that were significantly smaller than my own, because I respond to energy, and I've already turned down a few channels that were quite large, but it's all about presentation. I mean, if I'm feeling what you said in an email, then yeah, I'll respond with it. But it's I mean, there are some that have wanted me on their channel, large channels, but it's for ulterior motives, and they're really easy to see through. And I'm just not gonna do it. But I got to protect Archaix. It took me a while to build, so I got to protect it.
Oh man, so glad I have something to turn on every day and watch rather than movies and stuff, because you've brought a lot to the table, man. So hope you get a good night's rest and hope you get a break from all that you do, and look forward to all more and more stuff that you'll put out, man.
Hey man, you know what? The only break I'm gonna get is in between the next Modelo, and that's good enough. That's good enough for me. All right, man. Good night.
Good night. Take care, Jason.
In both the description box and the comments section below, you will find my personal email. Ask me any questions. You have video ideas, I'd like to hear them. And if you want to donate, all those buttons are accessible below. Playlists and everything you might need, access to the gates to my websites.